Brett Yormark wants the 5-11 model for the future college football playoff and feels it's best for the Big 12 and the sport. You know what? He's absolutely right. And it's absolutely what's best for the Utah Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into this show, make sure you like and subscribe. My name is JT Wistrcill, and today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On today's Locked On Utes, we're going to be talking about the college football playoff and what's best for Utah in it, because there are multiple formats and models, and the future of the sport is just being discussed. And I do think that there is a clear option that is best for the Utah Utes when talking about the future of the college football playoff. When I say two options, what do I mean? Well, the college football playoff is eventually going to be expanding to 16 teams, but the format in which it's then structured is still being determined. There's the best model, in my opinion, and the one that Brett Yormark is the biggest fan of, the 5-11 model. He came out very strongly saying he feels it's best for the Big 12 and especially college football, and I agree. What do I mean by 5-11? So 5-11 model would be 5 highest ranked conference champions. So you get the 4 teams that win the P4, and then the one group of 5 team, the highest ranked group of 5 teams. So I guess they don't have to be a conference champion, but the highest ranked group of 5 team basically, but more than likely are, actually, I think they do actually have to be a conference champion. So let me correct myself there, but the group of 5. But either way, so those 5, and then the 11 best teams in college football make the playoff. Well, what do the Big Ten, especially, and the SEC somewhat at one point, propose? Instead of 5-11, they wanted 4 auto bids per their conferences. 4 for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC. Big 12 would get 2, same with the ACC. A couple at-large spots, and then group of 5 representatives still. I think that's terrible for the sport. I've said it as soon as it was brought up, that the worst thing we could do, maybe in the history of college football, that might be a little dramatic. Excuse me, I can be a little dramatic sometimes. One of the worst things that's ever happened to college football would be allowing 4 teams to get in a conference just because we say so. I think that would be catastrophic. Think back to last year. Alabama just gets to get in because they're Alabama. Like, not because they earned it, but because it's like, well, you finished 4th in the SEC, and I guess, hey, that means you earned it. But like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You have to win your way in and be determined based on the criteria you put out on the field that you are deserving of college football playoff. I just think 4 auto bids is way too much. And what's crazy is, more likely than not, those SEC and Big Ten teams would earn their way in there with their results. Like, so I don't know why we have to guarantee 4 auto bids. I guess it's a way for them to get more teams in, but to me, it's just like crap. I really do think it's crap. So the biggest thing right now is that what's holding all this up, because the SEC and Big Ten are able to get their way when they agree. They don't agree right now. The Big Ten, the Big Ten's commissioner, Tony Petitti, wants 4 auto bids. The SEC at one point did. There's a good article from Brett McMurphy of On3 talking about this. The SEC at one point did want that, but the SEC coaches actually publicly pushed back on the 4AQ model and said preferring the 5-11 format for the 16 teams. And someone said, who's very familiar from Brett McMurphy's article, who's very familiar with the situation, said, we're staying at 12 teams in 2026 unless something moves. So that's very interesting. The fact that we might not even go to 16 teams in 26, which I'm fine with. If you were just to say, hey, JT, what do you think the right number of teams for the college football playoff is? I actually go 8. Like, I think a couple of years ago when we had Florida State and Georgia get left out, those were 2 teams that should never be left out of any sort of playoff format. So 4 was too small for me. But I do think in some ways 12, you are taking teams with lesser resumes. Whether SMU got in last year, right? But like whether it was SMU, Bama, even Tennessee, like we're just letting some of these teams in with lesser resumes. And I realized that last year's Ohio State team wouldn't have been in. They won the national championship. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I just feel like that's a good number is 8. Either way, they're not going to go to 8. They're going to go to 12 and 16 eventually. But why is 5-11 what's best for Utah? Because guaranteeing 4 auto bids for the SEC and Big Ten each. So half the field would be those teams just guaranteed every year. There are going to be years when that's the case in the 16-team playoff. But the fact that they want to guarantee that is terrible for the sport, because there will be years that multiple Big Ten, and I understand that they would say, oh, you get multiple spots, you get 2 spots. But in a 16-team format, there are going to be years where 3 Big Ten and 3 ACC teams deserve to get in. And that's going to be very challenging to do if the SEC and Big Ten, well, more so the Big Ten now. Usually the SEC is the big bad. Right now it's the usually the SEC is big bad. Right now it's the Big Ten. If they get their way, that would just be terrible for the sport, as I mentioned too. So I do think that it's absolutely best for the sport to go 5-11. It's just the most fair model. And once again, like, you're going to get teams in more likely than not. But my biggest issue will be the teams that don't deserve it on certain years will just get in just because. Like, let's not forget the Big Ten. Yes, they got 4 in, but they barely got 4 in. They got Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Indiana. There was not another team there until like Illinois at like 18 or 20, whatever it was. So like, what if Indiana had been a team that lost some of those multiple games? Then all of a sudden they just get in because they played in the Big Ten? Like, that's never what college football has been. It's never what it's supposed to be. It's becoming a popularity contest in some ways, but what it has to be and needs to be is that we get the best teams in. And there is still a chance and an opportunity to do that moving forward in the future with 5-11. Not allowing 8 AQs for the top dogs just because they want it. Once again, travesty for college football if that's what happens, in my opinion. I can't articulate enough how much I think that would genuinely be terrible for the sport, that we just give teams a pass because of the conference they play in. That is what Greg Sankey and Al Petiti as well have always been trying to say, like, oh, our conference is so tough, the best. And I mean, if I hear, thankfully we're finally moving on to next season, right? Like, if I hear any more crying and complaining about little old Alabama, and I'm a massive Kalen DeBoer fan. I like what he's built. But, I mean, I like what he's done as a head coach, but my gosh, like the Crimson Tide as a whole, I just thought that was ridiculous last year. Beat Vandy. Beat who's the Oklahoma, and you're fine. Like, don't lose to those teams. And instead, you're going to just yell at all of us like, oh, hard to wonder what those other teams would have been. And it's just, the SEC propaganda can be nauseating. But once again, like, it's the Big Ten that's holding us up more than anything. Let's go 5-11. That's fair. That's what's right. Like, whatever sport was designed and intended, there's no sport out there actually where you just say one league is tougher than the rest. And yes, I realize the SEC and Big Ten are better than the Big 12 and ACC, but that does not mean they just get to be guaranteed spots, because there are going to be years, especially in the NIL era now, where we see Texas Tech doing what they're doing, where these teams are going to put up rosters that are comparable to those top dogs and powerhouses. And at the end of the day, it's supposed to be the best teams. And I know that can get thrown around and articulated, but like SMU to me proved last year that they were one of the 12 best teams. And if SMU got to play Alabama, I would have loved to see that game. Maybe Bama squeaks it out. But I thought, based on what we saw, SMU proved that they deserved that spot more. And I thought they proved that they were better than Alabama based on some of those late season losses that Alabama had too. So I'll just say it again. We got to do 5-11. Do not allow those 4 AQs. Yes. Would Utah technically have a better chance of getting in each year if you just say, like, oh, they automatically get 2 AQs? Sure. I think 2 Big 12 teams are going to have no problem getting in a 16-team field. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that will be the case. But the question is, can we get 2 Big 12 teams this year? Brett Yormark said they have to. I think it's going to be really challenging. And a friend of the show, Brice Larson, joined me at Big 12 Media Day to discuss the most likely outcome if the Big 12 is going to be able to get multiple teams in the college football playoff this year, or if not. We're debating that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. MLB is in full swing. The All-Star break is now behind us. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights or golf on the green, because we got golf too. Don't forget high-stakes soccer action too. FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes every regular season game feel like a must-watch event. Whether I'm playing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride in the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. College football is right around the corner, so is the NFL season. Now is the best time to get in on the action with FanDuel. Will the Big 12 be a multi-bid league this coming season in the college football playoff? That is a question that friend of the show, first time joining me in person, Brice Larson of ESPN Radio in Utah. It's going to help me answer. Unfortunately, Brice, I'm just going to go no. I think it's factors outside of just like, hey, being good enough. I just think it's really hard. I think it's more than likely the Big 12 only gets one in this year. I'd love it if it was two. The ACC proved it is possible. But as we sit here right now, I just got to do the safe bet and go, I think they only get one in.
I agree with you. It's a tough situation because I was just really talking about this with a couple of other guys. The 5+11 model, obviously not this year, but in the future, and Brett Yormark betting on the Big 12 and the future of the Big 12 conference. It's really tough. You have to have people on the committee that favor the Big 12. Have we seen that precedent so far throughout college football? No. So what does that lead me to believe? I don't think that they're going to be a multi-bid league into the college football playoff this year. Is there good enough teams to do so? Possibly, but the parity in the Big 12 conference is going to be a big story once again this year in the Big 12. I think that is something we've seen in the past and will continue to see for a while.
You mentioned the parity. This is a conference that Brett Yormark today called the deepest conference in college football. Unfortunately, again, that's got to be area I disagree with him. I'd still go the overall depth of the LSUs, like some of the teams the SEC just has to offer. I'd lean them. I think you could definitely make an argument, though, that Utah's right there with the rest of them. I don't love the big conference narrative just being the best just because they are, but I do feel like for deepest overall, I'd still lean the SEC, although I do feel like the Big 12 has really strong depth being a P4 conference still.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that there's definitely an argument there for it. The fact that you get so many games, so many teams where every single week you can have a team go down. We saw that last year in the Big 12. Going into the last week of the season, JT, there were like 9 teams that could get into the Big 12 championship game with tiebreakers and different things like that. I think that's going to happen once again. You just lose 2 games, 3 games, and you could still be right there with a chance at a Big 12 championship appearance. We'll see how it all plays out, but yeah, it very well could be one of, if not the deepest conference in America. I don't necessarily disagree with Brett Yormark in that assertion.
One thing I found very interesting, and actually I was on your show actually speaking out pretty strongly against the decision, was the Big 12 did not do their preseason media poll this year. Chris Kleiman, the Kansas State head coach, actually said on the podium, he feels like that hurt BYU, Arizona State from a national perspective. I see the points, but I don't feel like that was the case. I interpret it differently. I feel like that is a strong thing that they do. I like that they do the preseason polls. I think it's a cool thing for motivation too, because we all know that Kenny Dillingham was telling his team, hey, you guys finished, like they think you're going to be this bad. So I just really disagree with the decision to do away with it. And I don't think it hurt that national perception. I think at the end of the day, like ASU ended up getting their fair shake and due. It took some time. Like, yeah, could they maybe been ranked a few spots more? Yeah, but they also weren't a dominant team. They found ways to win, but I would never associate the word dominant with them. So I feel like by the end of the season, that preseason notion had gone away, and I don't really feel like it ended up hurting them in the final rankings. How do you view that?
I would say here's what I think about this is I don't know that the preseason poll had much to do with BYU not getting the respect. I think if you beat Kansas at home, you can lose to Arizona State, you'll get more respect in that right. You make it to the Big 12 championship game, you're going to get more respect in that right. The fact that the Big 12 wasn't really considered for more than one bid last year had more to do with the performance on the field than it did in a Big 12 preseason poll. I think it also comes down to who's in the room for the college football playoff committee. Who was in that room last year that was fighting for the Big 12? There were 2 people that were supposed to be watching the Big 12 the entire season. It was Gary Pinkel, a former Missouri head coach, and then there was also a former professor that was a member of the media. They always have one member of the media in the Big 12 or in the college football playoff committee. Neither one of those 2 really have an affinity towards the Big 12 conference. I think if they are going to get that person in that, it's got to be a former, an actual former Big 12 head coach, not a former Big 12 head coach that went into the SEC now. It's got to be a former Big 12 player. It's got to be a media member that covered the Big 12. in order to get that affinity in that room for the college football playoff committee to kind of lean their way rather than getting that SEC or Big Ten bias.
Something interesting you do mention too is that a lot of the coaches today were actively speaking out during a roundtable discussion. They want more coaches on those committees as well too, and I'm absolutely in favor of that as well too. I don't feel like those coaches would show bias. I feel like they'd be fair. I feel like they understand just what a grind it is on a season overall, and especially coaches of the Big 12 and the ACC, because I do feel like those voices are not always heard as much, and some of the narrative stuff that gets pressed is always so bothersome. I'll just say that. But for you, we're here day one of Big 12 Media Day. What was your biggest takeaway from everything that's been said so far, if we haven't touched on it yet?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, I think we did touch a little bit on what Brett Yormark had to say about the conference. I think that's got to be number one. Another thing that he said, but once again, the Big 12's open for business. Couldn't tell you what he meant by that. We'll see, I guess, in the near future. But another thing that comes to mind is just kind of the storylines that are playing out as we go into this college football season. How will the future of the college football playoff work out with the 5+11 model? Obviously not this year, but the next year. Is it going to be that model? Is there going to be a different one that pops up? Once again, Brett Yormark reaffirmed in saying he still believes that's the best way to go forward for the Big 12. It's a bet on yourself situation. So I think that's really important from the commissioner of the Big 12.
We haven't gotten a chance to hear from Utah yet at Big 12 Media Days, but Brice, this is just talking season we're in right now. What do you think about this Utah team for this coming season? Just how you're overall feeling about them, and are they going to be one of the teams that bounces back?
I think they'll have a bounce back year from a season ago. How good it will be on par with a Big 12 championship season. I think they've got a little bit ways to go there. Big question mark on how the offense is going to roll out there. What does the defense still look like, especially the depth? And I think one thing that Utah fans know well, and unfortunately, is just what does the injury situation look like? Injuries happen every single season. How deep are they at every single position? There's a lot of questions for me still with Utah as there is with BYU. I think they're both somewhere between 5 to 10 in the conference. Best case scenario.
BYU still?
I do. I think so. Yeah. Even especially with look, I'm one of the people that I give Jake Retzloff a lot of credit for what happened last year. He led them to multiple different wins over Utah, over Oklahoma State. I think that there will be more of a drop off at quarterback than some people think. I know a lot of people go back to saying that he was 11th best in the Big 12 last year. He wasn't that great of a quarterback. I think there's still going to be a little bit of a drop off because he's the dude that knew the offense the best. He knew it was the expectation of the coaching staff. So I think there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10 is where both BYU and Utah are going to end up. I would be surprised if either one of those two teams are a top 4 team in the conference.
That'll be interesting to see. Time will tell who ends up being up there or not. Brice, great to have you on in person, my friend. Really appreciate it stopping by. That's going to do it for this part of Locked On Utes. Greatly appreciate Brice Larson making the time to come on. So great to meet him in person. That was one thing I loved about Big 12 Media Day is just being able to meet so many of these guests that I interact with routinely, like through these screens. That was the thing with a lot of these Big 12 hosts. Like we're all scattered throughout the country. So it's awesome to get to meet some of these people in person and great to meet Brice. Always appreciate him making time to come on and great to hang out with him in person at Big 12 Media Days. So we talked about a lot in that interview, recapping some of the biggest points that me and Brice made in the last segment. Just once again, like, will the Big 12 get multiple teams in? I don't think so. I just think the league is going to beat up on itself again, and more than likely it'll only be one. Would love it if it was multiple. Think it's possible, but it's going to be incredibly difficult because of how this league is, and having multiple teams with less than 2 losses is a daunting task in the regular season because this conference is really good. And I do not think the top of the conference is the level. I don't know how many national title contenders there are in the Big 12, right? So that's where it gets tough. That's why we see the SEC teams able to emerge usually multiple with just 1 or 2 losses because some of those top ones are title contenders. And I don't think there's a title contender in the Big 12 right now. Would love to be proven wrong, but that's how I see it too. Going back to the question though, like some of the top things that stood out from the interview, Brice said like the Big 12 performance in the field is the biggest reason they didn't get anyone else in. Yep, he's absolutely right. BYU beat Kansas at home, and you very well have a much better argument to get in. Because then you're a one-loss team, and it was at an ASU team. That was red hot. Would have been really hard to keep BYU out. If that was the case. But what did BYU do? Like kept squeezing by Oklahoma State and these other games. And, Jake Hatch is going to be on the Big 12 crossover later. Like he said Indiana. He said BYU would have beat Indiana by 20. I vehemently disagree with that. I'd probably slightly lean the Hoosiers in that game. I actually think it'd be a really good game, but I liked Indiana a lot last year. And really they beat up on everyone that wasn't the two teams that won the national champ that competed for a national championship. And I know what Ohio State did to them, but once again, like BYU didn't play any team close to the caliber of Ohio State. So how are we going to be like, oh, BYU would have beaten them by 20 when I don't think BYU would have fared very well against Ohio State. So I do think that performance is the biggest reason they didn't get teams in, and not this preseason narrative about what BYU was going to be. If BYU had looked better and won some of those games in more convincing fashion than squeezing by teams. And once again, I get it. It's like, hey, did they win it? Yes or no? Like they did, but win it in convincing fashion. So that's what I think is funny about that. Then moving on from there to, I still think the deepest conference is the SEC, and I don't think that's any shade to, and I would go the Big Ten the next two. This is something we talk about in our squad shows more tonight too. I don't feel like there's any shade in saying that, but I look at Alabama, whenever there's going like playoff contenders, like multiple playoff contenders, like the Big 12, we have Big 12 title contenders. I don't know how many of those teams I would say are playoff contenders. Alabama, I would say, is one. I would lean Florida as that. Georgia, obviously. LSU is another one there. And then you get South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas. And that's not, and Ole Miss. There's tons of other ones in this conference. This is the deepest conference in college football. Now, I don't think it's as large as the margin the SEC likes to make it up to be, right? Because then they're screaming and crying about how many teams they deserve to get in, as we were just kind of fighting about earlier, right? So there's a balance there, but I don't think it's bad to say, hey, I do believe the SEC is the deepest conference. But that doesn't mean that they deserve 4 auto bids. That just means that they have the deepest conference, and then we let it settle out and see which of the teams deserve to be in. A reminder, ASU nearly beat Texas. That's what this is about, is earning that opportunity on the field and proving you're one of the best teams. And yes, we have to do interesting comparisons because not all these teams play each other, but I do believe that's the deepest conference, but the Big 12 deserves the opportunity too. And Brett Yormark did, like me and Brice mentioned a little bit, like Brett Yormark dropped his tease about expansion. I don't know about y'all, and look, we'll probably get more of it eventually. If it benefited Utah, maybe a chance to the Big Ten, but like I've said before recently, even though at one point I was very pro Utah to the Big Ten, I want to be in a place where we can win and make college football playoffs. Utah's brand was never what Nebraska was, but I think about how diminished the Cornhusker brand is now that they are in the Big Ten, and I don't want that to be Utah. If they go to the Big Ten, I'd rather them get in the Big 12 where every year they could win the league and have a chance to go to the college football playoff, right? So there's that. I'm really, but going back to the original point, I'm all expansioned out. I don't need any more expansion. There's no one that's really attractive. I feel bad what happened to Oregon State and Washington State, but the Pac-12 is doing its thing now. Big 12 is doing its thing. Can we stop with the changes to college football? I feel like the old man get off my lawn, but I'm sure a lot of you will agree. Like I love this sport the way it is. I really didn't want to see the Pac-12 break up. That's why I feel like sometimes I get labeled anti-Big 10 or Big 12. It's just because I was like, oh, I like the Pac-12. I wanted things to stay the same they were. Just like I always enjoyed the Big 12 as it was. And now it's changed. And there's nothing we can do about it. But like I mentioned, I'm expansioned out. I really don't have a desire to add more teams. But if Brett Yormark thinks that's what's right, he's made the right moves consistently. So I would trust him. But yeah, that's how I'm feeling about expansion and a wide range of other topics as we've covered so far on today's Locked On Utes. Thank you guys as always for listening. Let me know in the comments below, which playoff format do you prefer? Would you rather the Big 12 get those 2 auto bids, even if it means giving the SEC and Big 10 4? Or would you rather that 5-11 model where there's 11 at-large spots on top of winning the conference championship? And do you think we're just going to stay at 12 for a few more years, which I wouldn't be opposed to, honestly. So once again, thanks to Brice Larson for hopping on the show today. That is going to do it for this show. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football has you covered, as well as the portal where Brian Smith recaps all the latest happenings in the world of college athletic movement in the transfer portal. That's going to do it for our show today. We'll be back tomorrow with a fun episode talking about Devin Dampier. I'm starting to really get fired up about Devin Dampier. What am I talking about? Tune in tomorrow to find out on Locked On Utes.